Hello and welcome to Mr. Thompson's Math Tutorials. Today what we're going to be looking at is simplifying radicals. So let's have a look at this radical right here. So this is the square root of 16. When I look at the square root of 16, what I'm really asking myself is basically the opposite of squaring. A square root is the opposite of squaring, just sort of like addition and subtraction are opposites, and multiplication and division are opposites. So what I'm thinking of is this 16 is a number that's been multiplied times itself, and that equals 16. So I have to think of two numbers that I can multiply together to give me 16. So 16 is made out of 4 times 4. So that would tell me that the square root of 16 is actually equal to 4. It's the number times itself that equals 16. Now, let's consider this one here, the square root of 27. The square root of 27 does have two numbers that multiply together to give me 27. It would be 5 point something, 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 something. So it's not a nice even number. And in math, we like things to be simple and elegant. And, 5 point blah, 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 blah is not simple and elegant. So I'm going to think about other numbers that make up 27. And what I'm going to be looking for are perfect squares. So perfect squares are 1 times 1, which is equal to 1, 2 times 2, which is 4, 3 times 3, which is 9, 4 times 4, which is 16, and etc. So what I want to think to myself is, are there any perfect squares in 27? Essentially, a perfect square times another number that equals 27. So I know that 9 times 3 is 27. Well, 9 is a perfect square. It's right here. So I can use that to help simplify this radical. Now, these two things are the exact same thing. The square root of 9 times the square root of 3 is equal to the square root of 9 times 3, which is equal to the square root of 27. Now I know the square root of 9, that's 3 times 3. 3 times 3. And 3 times 3 is equal to 3. Or sorry, the square root of 3 times 3 is equal to 3 times the square root of 3, which cannot be simplified because there are two numbers that multiply together to give me 3 that are the same, but again, they're going to be decimals and it's going to be a bit messy. So I'm happy with leaving this just like that. Let's look at another example of this. Here we have 3 times the square root of 24. So this is the same as 3 times the square root of 24. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look again for those perfect squares. So two numbers that multiply together to give me 24. Well, how about 4 times 6? Now, 3 times 4, well, the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. This is the exact same thing. 3 times the square root of 4 3 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 6 is the exact same thing as 3 times the square root of 4 times 6, which is the exact same thing as 3 times the square root of 24. So these are all equal, and I'm allowed to do this. Now I can simplify this radical right here because it's a perfect square. So this would be 3 times the square root of 4, which we know is 2, times the square root of 6. I'm now going to put this back together. So simplify. 3 times 2 is 6 times the square root of 6. And that is simplified right there. Okay, let's look at this question right here. So I'm going to follow the same sort of procedure. Negative 2 times the square root of 18 is the same as negative 2 times the square root of 18. Negative 2 times, now I'm going to pull apart or factor my 18. Okay, so I know that 18 can be equal to 9 times 2. Now I picked 9 times 2 because 9 is a perfect square. 6 times 3 is also 18, but 6 is not a perfect square and 3 is not a perfect square, so I would not choose that. 18 times 1 will also give me 18, but this is not a perfect square. That is, but it's basically the square root of 1 is 1. So I can ignore that one also. So I want to pick this 9 times 2 because that is a perfect square. Okay, so I'm going to separate this now. Once again, 2 times the square root 2 times the square root of 9 times 2 is the same as 2 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So negative 2 times the square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of 2. Negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6, and then I have the square root of 2. All right, thank you so much.